Welcome in to the New Orleans Saints podcast, hosted by Erin Summers and John DeShazier. You'll hear from players, coaches, broadcasters, and writers who cover the team on a daily basis. The New Orleans Saints podcast starts right now. Here's your hosts, Erin Summers and John DeShazier.
Welcome into the New Orleans Saints podcast. I'm Erin Summers. John DeShazier and myself have a very special guest today, former Saint, two-time Super Bowl champion, three-time Pro Bowler. He was a first-round draft pick out of Ohio State, Malcolm Jenkins. Jenkins played 13 years in the NFL, and he has now recently written a book all about his life as a football player and what he's dealt with off the field. It was a really interesting read. Had a lot of fun diving into it over the weekend. Jenkins is actually going to be in town this evening in New Orleans, 1030 Elysian Fields Avenue, Baldwin and Company at 6 o'clock, doing a book signing and a Q&A. So you can go pick up the book there. It is called What Winners Won't Tell You. And on the podcast today, Jenkins goes into why he wrote the book, some of the stories within the book, and of course, we talk about the Saints. Malcolm, thank you so much for joining us on the New Orleans Saints podcast. You have a lot going on. Recently published your book. You are doing a ton of book signings, TV appearances. I feel like I see you everywhere. I saw you in the locker room the other day because, as JD mentioned, your book's out there amongst the players here as well. So your face was on the cover of your book and out there. So how are you with everything going on?
I'm a little anxious, but it's been fun. I was telling people I haven't really been this nervous probably since the Super Bowls that I played in. It's definitely a new space for me, definitely a vulnerable position, but getting the chance to talk about old memories, talk about the book, and all of these kind of not only the impactful moments, but impactful people in my life has been really, really cool, to share that story. Kind of a new version of it with family, friends, and obviously my supporters.
Why was this something that you wanted to do?
Well, I've always, you notice as you get older how many guys gravitate towards you. And I know I did as a young player. I looked at the Drew Breeses and Jonathan Vilmas of the world and, wanted to know what made them tick, wanted to know what their motivations were. And I noticed as I got older in my career, I had that trail of people who were following me. And I thought the best way to kind of leave those lessons or teach people and leave those breadcrumbs was in a book. And not just about the successes that I've had, but really the entire journey, the pitfalls, the failures, and all the things that have really made me who I am. And hopefully that it helps people. And so far the response has been great. A lot of inspiration. A lot of people are appreciative that they've seen, both sides of the coin.
When you started out to write the book and you were going to publishers, you had mentioned that you didn't get a lot of good responses or people wanting to pick it up. What changed? Was it, what you decided to tell or how you decided to tell your story that then became, what ended up in the book?
Yeah, I think, what changes, I found an editor the editor who saw the potential in my story found me. I got a lot of, the polite passes where it's like, oh, this seems exciting. We'll get back to you. And, you just don't hear anything. And then I had a young editor who just got the job as a chief editor at Simon & Schuster or senior editor. And his job was to get a few books. And knowing a little bit about my story and knowing my name being Malcolm, he just looked at the proposal we had and I guess figured that there was a little bit more there. He wanted to talk to me one-on-one. And he gave me, through a conversation, just a framework of how to look at it. And so I stepped away for a little bit. This was right before the 2021 training camp, and wrote about 50 pages of my own. That was the proposal we sent in. And then that's what Simon & Schuster acquired. And so that kind of gave me a little bit, it was a more authentic voice. I wrote it myself. And in that training camp, I was really starting to unpack, my career, the things I've learned. You start to see guys like Jameis Winston and guys like that. They sit across from you at breakfast and they look to see what you're working on and things like that. You realize you have so much influence. So I'm literally kind of building the plane, as I'm flying it. when it comes to writing a book, which I think just made it such more of an authentic story.
Malcolm, I have to admit, I'm not a voracious reader. Now, there are certain books I read, 1619 Project, I think Barack Obama's book, but few books like grab you and pull you in. I felt like your book was one of those, and it was in part because of the vulnerability you showed. How difficult was that? Because usually athletes are not the most vulnerable people, or at least ones to share that vulnerability.
Yeah, it was therapeutic, I think, because it was difficult. And I think I'm in a place where I want to grow constantly. And that's how I was as a player. I want to get 1% better. Well, it's like, well, to grow, that usually requires some kind of change or going somewhere you haven't been, a depth, that you haven't gone to. And I think when it came to writing my story and talking about not only just what happened, because everybody's seen what happened, it's like how I felt about it, how I carried it, the things I've hidden, the things, that might seem as strength on the outside, but on the inside, I'm afraid or I'm worried or doubtful. Because it's a unique situation to walk around the world and people look at you as the strong one and look at you like nothing's like you're fearless and you'll take on anything. And but nobody sees that like you have a ton of self-doubt, you have a ton of anxiety, you failed plenty of times. It's weird to kind of go about life like that. So I really wanted to put that in this book as well. It's kind of liberating, kind of free to just say, no, here is me in my totality. Now, when you look back and see the things I've accomplished, you'll see them and probably appreciate them a little bit more. And when you look at what I'm doing now and the way I'm moving, hopefully it makes a little bit more sense.
How did you decide on the flow? Because the flow also was kind of enticing, where you do a flashback to childhood, and then you pull us into the regular season, or you pull us into a specific game, and then you have a flashback here, and again pull you into the Super Bowl and those kind of things. How did you decide on the flow of it?
Yeah, I'm one. I got a little bit of an attention disorder myself, so linear stories. I didn't want the reader to get bored. And I also didn't want you to pick up the book halfway and I just got to the NFL. Like, so I wanted it to feel like a fast-paced football game, the same way the offense goes forward and the defense is moving backwards. There's sudden change situations. That's kind of how I wanted the book to feel, that back and forth tempo, that as soon as you kind of get in a groove, something changes and there's things you got to fight back. There's doubt, there's fear, there's triumph. We find that in life. We find that in every football game, and really that's kind of how my career and my story. I wanted it to have that tempo and tell it through that lens.
Sudden change is a perfect description of it, because it was sudden change, and it was always keeping you kind of on the edge of your seat, trying to keep up and trying to figure it out, and those kinds of things. What do you think about, you mentioned writing it while you were in training camp. How difficult was that? Because training camp is an exhausting process.
Yeah, I think for me, I've always done better with structure. I feel like creativity happens within structure. And so that was one of the things that I've struggled with the most retiring, is I don't have a training camp environment. And so, in training camp, you are devoting all of this time to football. But so these fine little moments, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, the couple hours after practice, when you get to your room, I'm away from the kids. I'm away from, all of the distractions. I just sit up and write. And you realize you do that every day. You're in training camp for 3 to 4 weeks. All of a sudden you've got 50 pages, in training camp. It was actually really easy because everything was so organized. It was a little bit more difficult once I transitioned out of football and I had to pretty much write this book in 30 days because I had still had some writers and the voice wasn't quite there. And the book almost didn't come into fruition. We were about 30 days from the deadline without a manuscript that we could use. And I was just going to have to write it myself. And so I did exactly the same thing I did in the beginning. I put myself in a training camp, mode. I'm getting up at 5 o'clock, writing every day. I'm structuring. I take my kids to school, come back, do some more. And in 30 days, I'll put out this book that we have here cover to cover. So It is definitely that muscle memory. Those things that we've learned, are definitely applicable. I'm using the things I've learned through my 13 years in sports to just apply it to everyday life. It makes more sense to me that way, but it definitely helps me navigate some of those spaces, like writing a book that are new to me.
I've heard you describe yourself on several occasions as a person who is somewhat introvert, kind of shy. And yet, you write a book, you were a lead voice for the Players Coalition. You're the leader of the Malcolm Jenkins Foundation. I mean, how do you step out of your comfort zone to be able to do those things?
Yeah, I think I try to paint that in the book, is that that everything's very calculated. That I am somebody who strategizes, and if the moment or the situation calls for a voice, then I'll be that voice. I would much rather play the background, right? I would much rather lead from the behind the scenes, but every now and then I understand I have a voice and enough poise to step into those roles. And so to me, it's every situation is kind of by choice. It's a strategic thing. And I think that's really what it requires, right? It requires us not to always be on go, not to always be docile, but to have discernment. And when you see me as an athlete in this book, you'll see me trying to, in the middle of a play, discern what's the right thing to do, where's the right place to go. You'll see me navigating, decisions in the media, what's the right thing to say, how to address coaches, how to navigate situations with teammates and fans. We're all trying to figure out, how to navigate these situations, and it's really not a one size fits all type of approach. So I'm very much about trying to develop my own discernment.
Anytime that I've talked to you, you've always been a pretty open book, though, in the podcast
Yeah.
settings and obviously in this book. Is there anything that you were hesitant about telling, or something that you left out?
Yeah, I think there are plenty of things. I can't even put my whole life in a book. Book would be it'd be too long. So I had to go through a process of kind of pruning and making sense of what needs to be told and what doesn't for the narrative. And so there's parts, I talk about my family, my divorce. I don't really go too far into that because that's a very sensitive and active case for me, nor did I think it led to the story. There are plenty of situations with, coaches or players, and I tried to frame it as a matter of fact and just keep things not about my opinions on how things happen, but hey, here's the context, and now here's how I navigated it or felt about it or held it. And so there are things that I know are going to be touchy for a few people, but I hope it was or it's taken in a manner in which it was just significant to my story and an important piece to show how I navigated, how somebody might have offended me or how I might have wronged somebody else. And that was definitely a touchy thing to write about, but that's kind of what makes stories good stories, right? Is that you have a balance of the things that are real that make it authentic, and that is not just all flowers and lilies.
I mean, that first chapter when you're talking about getting taped to a goalpost, I was like, "Are you kidding me? This is what these guys do." That was pretty funny.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun memories of the Saints, especially in those formative years in the league. And it was the funny thing is I found a picture as I'm going back through all those memories, and I think there's a picture I have of me tying up Kenny Vaccaro to the goalpost as well. So I wasn't those traditions get passed on. Not only through stories, man, but it's funny.
I think you guys taped up Kenny here at this facility.
Yeah, we did. Yeah,
I remember. Okay, I remember that. Okay, so now I got two questions. I'll split them up. Now, the first one is there going to be a second book? And the second part is, who chose your photos? I mean, these are great photos. The cover photo I have a little bit of issue with because you're in Omega Sci-Fi fraternity and you got the brand in. Cover 2, I got through that part also. And great fraternity, just not quite as great as mine, but who chose the photos, and also will there be a follow-up?
Yeah, so everything in this book, was me, like cover to cover. So from the photos shoot that we did with the cover to the photo on the back, that's me going through my mom's old photos and deciding kind of what, play to the story. So that was the fun part. It was like the art part of the package. Like if you open the album, you want to look at the inside cover. That's kind of what that was for me. I do think there's going to be a second book. I really enjoyed this process, and I think right now I'm in the brainstorming phase of what that next book is going to be. Again, it's similar to this one where I'm part of what I am doing, the life I'm living right now is probably going to speak to what that book is. And just writing it from kind of, my perspective of transitioning out of the league, moving away from ball a little bit more, and then now finding kind of that new purpose in a different space.
Yeah. How much trepidation was there in this one? Because as you mentioned, some of these are ongoing situations and, you don't want to create a wound or open a wound or reopen a wound. And yet there are stories that need to be told for you to get to your truth.
Yeah, I think that's part of the journey. Exactly what you said is there are stories that need to be told to get to the truth. And I think, part of any journey is leaning into that part that is scary or dark, and being able to, just the same way this book, once you're done, you get through the story, you close it, and it's open-ended. There's more to write. It's not over. So even if it ends in a dark place or a questionable place, have opportunities to make that what you want. So writing this book was part of me being able to even put closure on, my career, put closure on the person that I was, and kind of look forward, no matter how unnerving it may be, to new experiences.
Hey, when you decided to call it a career, did you know? I mean, because I feel like almost everybody feels like they got a little bit more gas left. Were you pretty much tapped out? Were you done mentally or physically or both?
No, I think physically, I could still play. I think I could probably still play now physically, to be honest. I had a really, really healthy career, so I didn't have any nagging injuries. My body doesn't hurt, and I'm still in pretty good shape. I think mentally it was, there's so much you put into the game. Roman Harper used to always tell me, like, man, you only got one speed and it's full speed. And it's like everything I have, I put into, what I'm doing. And I think I'm just at a place in life where I want to take that same energy and drive and aim it at some other things like my family and aim it at, being creative, or even myself, taking care of, who I am. Some of the, like, even I talk about self-scout and reading your opponent and all these things I learned as a player, but as a person, I haven't really aimed that at myself. Who am I? What am I good at? What are my strengths, my weaknesses as a person? What can I get better at each day? What does that look like in a routine? What do I get up for? What are my motivations? Those are things I've done a lot of, soul searching with, especially at the latter part of my career. And I realized that the time that I gave to the game was probably the thing that started to weigh on me the most, is I wanted to get some of that time back and aim it at the things that eventually will be the majority of my life, and that's outside of sports.
You're over here making me feel bad. Like I need to do some self-scouting and figure out, like, get some more structure in my life.
No, it's all, everyone's on their own journey, you find it when you get there.
You are in town currently, going to do a book signing later today, and then you'll be back again for the Saints game on Thursday. Going to be a legend of the game. How exciting is it to be here to share your book here in the city, and then to be able to come to the game and be honored again as a Saint?
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. I've stayed away from the game a little bit over the last year. Half of it was me writing this book. The other half was me literally trying to exhale. And so being able to put the book out and allow people to kind of see and contextualize what I had just been through, and then reflect on it and go back, is going to be special. This is the first event we've done in New Orleans for a while, so that's exciting. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. This will be my first Saints game this season. And yeah, it's like after this book, it feels like everything's new now. Now all these stories that we can go back and talk about have a different lens. So I'm definitely excited for that dialogue.
Has the feedback been good from some of the people that are in the book?
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of feedback, both positive and some people got some hurt feelings a little bit, but it's all. But most of the things, people have heard me say, face to face. I didn't put anything in there that I wouldn't tell somebody to their faces. But I have gotten a lot of, text messages from teammates or people who knew me really, really closely, and they're like, "Hey, I appreciate you being this vulnerable. I had no idea you were dealing with things like that." People were saying, "Hey, I wish I would have checked on you more." And so even it at least lets me know that I've been seen, that I definitely came correctly and authentically in this book, that it came across that I was trying to showcase more of the experience and the journey, and I think people have gotten that, which is the whole purpose of me writing it. So it's been amazingly rewarding to get the feedback.
You said that you took a little bit of a break from football, but have you been watching any this season? Have you seen the Saints play at all?
Yeah, I've seen them play. They're playing well. I think last week was a really good win. You go to Foxborough, you get you a solid all around team victory is kind of what you need. The culture is still there. I think you see that. Obviously, you start getting a little bit of injuries here or there. That's always going to affect the type of team you are and the ways that you need to go about winning. But I think that if any team, has shown that this team is one that can adapt to win in multiple ways, and especially starting with defense. As long as that defense stays together and is continuing to play the way it is, I think they'll always have a shot.
Yeah, I mean, how impressive was that defensive performance and just the way that they've played so far this season? They got 9 takeaways. That's definitely something they emphasized in the offseason. But to put up a shutout, I mean, how hard is that?
Oh, yeah, it's tough. I mean, to go on the road and pitch a shutout too is no small task in the NFL. So, you can win any game if the other team doesn't score a point, and that's a testament to the leadership on the defense. It's a testament to Dennis Allen, who's obviously a defensive mind, and leads this team with the defense first. And so and to continue to have success, you're going to have to see that consistency. It won't be a shutout every week, but I think when you look at the points they allow and then the takeaways, those two things alone will keep you in any game.
Malcolm, did you pick 6 in New England also?
I did, yeah. Ironically,
Okay.
it was right up the same sideline that Tyron had is. So yeah,
Now,
I had to blink twice for a second and thought it was a replay.
yeah, I thought about it. I was like, Malcolm got one last time we were here too.
Yeah.
Back to your book, a couple of things. The passage or with your grandmother at the wedding, I teared up a little. I got to admit. And also, can you just tell us about the trip to Ghana? Because my wife went there. What is it called? The gates of no return?
Yeah,
And there's a source of
doors of no return.
Yeah, doors of no return. There's a source of angst between she and I because she went to Ghana and I didn't. And she's always telling me about it.
Yeah.
And now I read it in the book where you went. What was that experience like for you? Because for her, it was really a changing event.
Yeah, it was. I put that story in a chapter called 111, and we talk about I heard that term in the same locker room about special teams. You're one person on a team of 11. You can't do everything, but you do have a role, and you have, in that role, you're supposed to be the best that you can be. And so I'm trying to find, a little bit more of my identity in my role, and I'm having a bit of a crisis. And so I decide to treat myself and my 2 brothers to a trip to Ghana. And when it came to like identity, it was something I had never experienced before. You go, and for the first time, I didn't realize this till I came back. I was there for maybe a week and a half. When I came back, it was the first time I realized I didn't think about being Black for probably that entire time. And immediately coming back to the United States, you're aware of your Blackness. And it was a break that I didn't know that I needed. But you go to the slave castles and you realize just, you see the infrastructure around the catastrophe and the slavery and the harshness of it. You're standing in the dungeons, you feel the vibrations, you can still feel death, and you wonder how these things, happen. You're filled with a little bit of rage, but at the end of it, you also realize, I made it back as a descendant, and we are not destroyed. We're still here. There's a sense of resilience and a sense of pride that is then, that then kind of gets draped over that entire sandwich of emotions. But it is something that it was really good for me to go back and find out. I've gone back 3 or 4 times. I bring different people with me for that experience because I think we are all looking for a little bit of identity, some pride to stand on. And that's just the entryway, right? Ghana's not even, in my DNA lineage. But I do know that the majority of slaves came through those coasts. So most of us can start our journey back to our own heritage through the shores of Ghana.
And JD's going to throw his name in the hat as somebody that gets to get a trip there with you next.
I wouldn't say it right now. I was going to wait till the podcast was over, but yeah.
He's like, yeah, add it to the list, yeah.
One thing that stood out to me throughout the book was you seemed like, and maybe this is just how football is, but you never gave yourself credit. Like you knew what you were doing completely. And obviously you had tons of winning plays that you made, but what was your moment where you're like, I know what I'm doing, I belong here, and it kind of all clicked for you?
It didn't click for me like that until maybe year 7. I think it was my second year with the Eagles is when it finally, I felt like, okay, I know what I'm doing, at this
That's
point.
wild. Year 7?
Yeah. Yeah, it really did. Because it took me to figure out, a lot of things had to come into place. It was not only just my maturation in the game and having the game slow down, but I had to figure out which position was best for me. I played for, at that point, maybe 5 or 6 different defensive coordinators at that time. So I'm playing now different schemes and how I fit in that scheme. And it wasn't until year 7 that I got into the right position where I was in my position personally. My game had developed, and I was in a situation where now all of that can come together, and I can maximize all of my talents, all of the cerebral parts of the game, the versatility, and that takes scheme, the player development, and coaches, and a roster that allows you to do that as well. Because when I first got in the league, there were just guys that were flat out better than me, and I needed time to develop. Then I changed the safety. Then it was nickel. Then we changed coordinators, and it starts over. So it's a bit of a journey for everybody. It definitely wasn't one of those things where I hit the ground running. I earned my keep on special teams, and whatever role I could get, I just embraced it and went harder and harder until I got that opportunity. And when I did, I never looked back.
Yeah.
Folks, if you're listening, Malcolm likes the nickel. He likes the nickel, and he likes to play press. Those 2 things, Malcolm.
That's all I want to do.
He likes the nickel, and he likes to play press. What was it like for you, Malcolm, to hear the Saints organization pretty much say, "Look, we messed up. We shouldn't have let him get out the door." I mean, because that was something that was said repeatedly, especially when you returned. But even when you were gone, they were saying, "You know what? We might have messed up there. We shouldn't have let him get out the door."
Yeah, I think it meant a lot to me. I know as a player because it's more than just the conversation. For me was more than just talent. Like when I left the Saints, I didn't get a phone call. Like it was my contract was up and free agency open, and I guess I guess I'm no longer on the team. And so, I could understand if talent-wise it just wasn't working out. But as a player, you start to think about all the other things you've invested, the time, the extra reps, the leadership, coaching up your players, like all of the things that, you would hope are noticed when it feels like they're going unnoticed. You're left with a sour taste in your mouth. And then you see players, start to struggle with, is this really family or is this business, type of conversation. And so a couple of years after that, to then hear them talk about, that was a mistake, but not really because of what I was doing on the field, but they talked about the leadership and the quality of what that role looks like in the locker room, the effect on other guys. Those are the things that I had hoped had gone noticed. So to hear them, talk about them, that definitely gave me some validation and let me know that at least all of the things that I was doing wasn't in vain. And it allows me to reduce it to just a business decision, which I can always understand.
And then to be able to come back here and end your career
Right.
here and it's kind of a cool full circle moment. I really appreciate all the time that you've given us today and just sharing your story, because the book was really enjoyable. And if you haven't bought it, if you guys are listening, definitely go pick up a book and take a few, a few hours, right? I know JD said he sped through it, but it definitely holds you. It's a good read, easy read. So appreciate it. Appreciate the time that you spent with us today.
No, thank you guys for having me.
Thank you, Malcolm. I'll be at the game. I'm bringing my Sharpie and my book. So
I got you. Yeah. I'm like, tell you, if all the fans out there, I do not mind. You see me out in the streets, you see me somewhere, you got a book, I will sign it. What winners won't tell you, I definitely try to unveil a lot of who I am in it, a lot of love in it, a lot of intention. So I hope everybody enjoys it.
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Saints podcast. Join us 3 times per week on NewOrleansSaints.com, the Saints mobile app, or you can download the podcast on iTunes. We'll see you next time, right here on the New Orleans Saints podcast.